Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is that you're watching this. My name is Lori Krajewski, and I'd like to welcome you to Coffee With. Today, we are having coffee with Teresa Palmer. Teresa has worked for over 2 decades as a holistic health and cardiology nurse practitioner, excuse me. She's been teaching individuals to connect to their heart, which is their superpower. By connecting to and understanding this gift we all have, the door is open to self-healing. Throughout her years of practice as a holistic cardiology nurse, Teresa has witnessed the miracles that occur when patients use their heart and its innate wisdom to guide their health and well-being. Teresa was chosen as the Nurse Practitioner of the Year in 2019. In 2020, she was honored by the International Association of Top Professionals as the Empowered Woman of the Year 2020 for her work in empowering individuals to be confident in their health decision-making. In 2021, she was honored as the Holistic Health Care Practitioner of the Decade for her continued work in holistic cardiology, and also received the Lifetime Achievement Award. Teresa is also an international best-selling author, and her book, Heal Your Heart from Within, is available on balboapress.com, amazon.com, and the Hay House online bookstore. I am so honored to have coffee with you today, Teresa. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
It must be quite an honor to be practitioner of the decade.
uh, it it was quite a surprise, and with the honors it came. I was on the marquee in New York City, and that was in February of 2020. It was actually Valentine's Day, and it was 2 weeks before all heck broke loose and everything
Right.
went down. So that was quite an honor. That went along with everything being featured on the marquee. So everything played for a week, and it
Very
was
exciting.
quite
Very
interesting.
exciting. And how validating for the work that you've been doing.
Definitely, definitely. Because what I've been doing for the past 20 or so years hasn't been traditional.
Right. So if you don't mind, I know this is really open-ended, but if you can just tell us a little bit about you and how you ended up in holistic heart care.
Okay. Well, my career started about 30 years ago. And at the time, I worked in cardiac surgery. I have to say it was a very arrogant field. I was very arrogant because we were told that we quote unquote heal and fix people. The people come to us, they get healed and they get fixed. And that's just how it is. People's lives are in your hands. You're the one. So that was my philosophy, and that's how I practiced in that field. And I began my own spiritual journey. I think it was really the year 2000 that I began working with a spiritual master, Sri Dharma Mitra, who's known as the Rock of Yoga. And in fact, my friend and I became his last initiates that he took under his wing to teach. So with that, I also had the opportunity to do a medical mission in a developing country. And I went there with the attitude again that I am the healer. A couple of things happened. Probably the most profound thing that happened was a monk came into our clinic, our medical clinic, collapsed at the door and had a heart attack.
Wow.
The nearest hospital was 60 miles away. Needless to say, we had to put him in a car and drive him to the hospital. I thought he was going to die. I
Sure.
really did. By looking at
Sure.
his EKG, what his heart looked like from that standpoint, it looked like it had suffered quite a bit of damage. He picked up on the fact of what I was feeling. He was very perceptive, and he told me he wasn't going to die. He said, "You see a man dying." He said, "I see a man who's going to overcome an obstacle." And I kind of thought, good luck with that. Once your heart is damaged, there's nowhere to go. So we made it to the hospital about probably a little less than an hour later, the ER doctor there confirmed. I mean, this was a hospital that had cows outside grazing. So there wasn't much technology going on at all. And, I thought, oh my goodness, if he's not dying on the way here, he's certainly going to die here. Um, the ER doctor confirmed there was nothing they could do because I was used to interventional things and surgery, and they did none of that. So they gave him a choice. He could either stay in the hospital or he could go back to the monastery. Well, he decided to go back to the monastery and take me with him because he felt that not only was I knowledgeable about things, but that I needed a lesson in healing, in self-healing, which I didn't believe at the time, I have to say. I went back to the monastery with him, stayed with him, did not expect him to be there the next morning. The next morning, he sat up, his vital signs were stable, and he ate breakfast. And he said to me, what kept him alive? And I had no answer. I said, you defied science. And he said, we all can defy science. It's just a matter of your perception of how you feel about yourself and your own self-healing. He said, if you could tap into your self-healing, you've got it made. He said, you're too dependent on technology and everything else. And, he said that in other places, like where he was at, he said, we know that we could help ourselves. And that's what we tap into, our own healing power. And he told me his heart was his healing power. And not only did he make a recovery, I went back to that same country in 2001 to follow up with the mission. And he was helping out as a translator in
Wow.
the clinic. So he made a complete full recovery. When I left that country, it totally changed how I felt about my practice, what I was doing. And I never practiced the same way again. I realized that I wasn't the healer, that my job was to help people tap into their own power. Of course, I kept it kind of quiet because you could understand in the year 2000, 2001, how far that would get in cardiac surgery. Not very far.
Not very.
As I learned my own spiritual and I learned more about breathing and about connecting to your heart, I passed that along to my patients. The other thing that happened in this country when I first arrived was where we were at was close to a school. And every morning I would see the children gather in the courtyard of the school. They would hold hands and they would sing a song. And translated into English, it was every cell in my body is happy because I am at peace in my heart. I got permission not only to watch the children, but to join them and to see actually what went on with them. And I saw how they had this spirit that we lose as adults, that not only were they intuitive, but they were compassionate. They practiced gratitude with each other. And they lived so innocently.
Right.
And that they tapped into their heart for all of this, that they really believed that, again, that if they practiced compassion, this is the way they were brought up: compassion, resilience, forgiveness, gratitude, that if you could do this, then you would lead a peaceful, calm, healthy life. So although they didn't know it at the time, they were living from their heart. We know that gratitude, compassion, we know what those things do, that those things help build our immunity because the heart is close to the thymus gland. And the thymus gland does get activated when we do these practices. And even though the thymus gland functions more when you're a child and kind of doesn't do much as an adult, science is figuring out that we could still activate that thymus gland, that it still is important to help our immunity. So when you connect to your heart, you connect to the vagus nerve, which is your parasympathetic nervous system, which is peace and calm. So will it solve all the problems? Will it prevent all the illness? Nothing really does, but 70, 80% of illness stress, anxiety,
Absolutely.
worry is a contributing factor. And if we could manage that through living and tapping into our heart, then technically we could manage our health. And that's what these people were tapping into without really knowing what they were doing.
I am really moved. I don't even really know what to say other than, wouldn't it be a beautiful world if we were all, as children, able to sing that song every single day and and raised with that gratitude, with that love and that inner peace. It would be a completely different world.
Yes. And I think if it were left up to children, without society and everything as you get older, we get conditioned to suppress things like intuition, to
Yes.
kind of go with the crowd, um, to not be who we're really meant to be. We're kind of told, in some sense, to kind of hide our soul, to kind of live as society tells us to do the things society tells us to. And I think if we were just brought up with just being children and just letting that flourish, that it would be a different world. I really believe that.
I couldn't agree more because we're old enough to know childhood before technology.
Yeah.
We're old enough to remember our childhood didn't have any technology. I mean, I, I knew one person with an Atari.
Yeah.
And we were always outside. We were always, everybody's talking about earthing now and grounding, right? Well, we were always barefoot in the grass, always, all the time.
I ate dirt.
And
I mean, I had
yeah,
an aunt who was a nurse, and
yeah.
I ate dirt. And
I,
when my mother tried to stop me, my aunt said it's good for her because there's iron in the soil. So literally, I ate dirt. And years later, when I went to practice as a nurse in dialysis, one of the things that would happen with patients is when their iron would go low and they would start to get anemic because of the blood leaving the body with the dialysis being purified coming back in, they would have a tendency to eat dirt. And that was one of the first signals that they were becoming anemic and needed iron. So, it was a very real thing. And I mean, that was like 20 years later, after
right.
I'm eating dirt, that I find out that, yeah, there really was something to it.
Right. There's always a reason why the body does what it does, right?
Right, exactly.
Sometimes it's a mystery to understand its language, but there's always a reason.
Yeah. And we really need to listen to our body. And I think now more than ever. And, I think at least in the United States, and I know in some parts of the world, we've been conditioned to look outside of ourselves. And I
Yes.
think we really saw that happen in 2020 when people didn't trust themselves at all. And
Yes.
they did look outside themselves. Healthcare professionals did not have all the answers. I really think it started to level the playing field between providers and patients. The patients began to awaken to the fact that they could really help themselves, and that a lot of times it is up to us to do that the best that we can. It's not to say there's not other things out there that could help us, but I think we reached a point where we were too dependent on things outside of ourselves, that we thought someone knew better than we did. And that someone, whether it be practitioners, any kind of medical professionals, psychologists, health coaches, even, and I'm not going to go there with this, but even governments and all kinds of things, that we just depended on everybody else to take care of us and mainly our health. And I think we realized that that wasn't working. That,
I hope a lot more people are still starting to realize, because you are absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. We have given over our power
yeah,
to literally everybody else for the answers. And I think it was probably a slow progress over the decades, right? But
oh,
we
yeah.
take our symptoms to a provider, they give us a pill, we follow their instructions, do as we're told, and everything will be okay, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's, there's always a catalyst. And I know since I've been practicing, I started practicing nursing in the 70s. I had patients couldn't tell you what medications they took or what they were
Yep.
for.
Yep.
And they would tell me, oh, ask the doctor.
Yeah.
Well, what do you take it for? The doctor knows.
Yep.
And I mean, that's been a pattern for
Oh, it
what.
still happens today. I just had that conversation with my mother last week. She has no idea, but then she can't pronounce her medications. She has no idea what they're for. And she doesn't know why she's taking them. And it's sad, really, because it's a direct example of how much power we have given over to others.
Yeah.
And I hope you're right. I hope more and more people are waking up to the fact that we have to not only take our power back, but look at our providers as a partner in our health, not as an authority, but as a partner,
Yeah.
and
And
work with them. And if you can't find a provider who's willing to work with you on your health, keep searching,
yeah,
because they're there. They're out there. There are providers who do want to, be open to learning and be open to new things and help you genuinely get well again.
yeah,
They're probably hard to find, but the tides are turning. Things are shifting.
yeah. And, again, like I said, there's always a catalyst. And I really believe that one of the really positive things that came out of the past few years was the fact that people are waking up to the fact of responsibility, that you just can't depend on everybody else. I mean, you could collaborate with them. I'm certainly not against medications. I'm not against anything. I think there's a place for everything. But, I think that an informed consumer, I mean, I forget what the appliance was, but remember an old commercial that said, what was it? An informed consumer is our best customer.
Mm, yes.
It's an appliance. And
Yeah.
it said that, oh, an educated consumer is our best customer. And they built a whole company. I think it may have been Whirlpool. They built a whole company around having everything out in the open about, what their appliances did, how to take care of them, what to look for in an appliance, what you should be seeking for. And they built a whole company, a whole campaign around an educated consumer is our best customer.
Wouldn't it be beautiful if healthcare was like that? I don't know if our healthcare providers want us educated and informed. I don't know.
We're getting there. We're getting there. I think it's been a little bit of a long road because, again, it's the way it's the way healthcare has been.
Yeah.
In healthcare has always been, I hate to say it, but go to someone, get a pill, and you don't have to do anything. It's like, remember when McDonald's made people fat?
Yeah.
Well, nobody forced a Big Mac down your throat. Nobody
Yep.
held a gun to your head.
Yep.
You made that decision. You made the decision to supersize, but yet we all blamed McDonald's.
Yes.
It was McDonald's fault. They shouldn't have these things because we're going to eat them. Well, you don't really have to. Nobody's forced you to go there. But it's just been, we're not used to taking
Yes.
responsibility. And I think we see that in a lot of things. We saw it even things, with obesity. I mean, there were good programs like Weight Watchers, certain things. But then there was also get a diet pill and let that do it for you.
Yes, fen. Do you remember fen and all
Yeah.
the problems that caused? As a cardiology practitioner, you must know all of the problems that
Oh,
caused.
yeah. Yeah, there
Oh
were
my
a lot of
gosh.
problems, a lot of heart valve problems with it.
Yes.
And yet that didn't scare people away.
Yeah.
People would
Because
still.
it was a fast fix.
And, the sad part would be I would see people that had 5, 10, 15 pounds to lose, which isn't a lot, really. And yet they wanted a pill to do it because they, quote unquote, couldn't do it themselves. You don't know how many times I heard people say, diets, Weight Watchers, none of that stuff works for me. You have to understand my body just doesn't respond to that. Well, it does if you journal and find out that you're eating 3 times as much as you think you're eating.
Mhm.
But we didn't take the time to do that.
Right.
It
Right.
was much easier, again, to look outside ourselves. And one
Right.
of the things with stress is if you're stressed out, if you're constantly worried, anxious, you're secreting a lot of cortisol, then you deplete your cortisol, which then starts to affect every organ over time in your body. One of the things it affects is your body's ability to hold on to fat. Your body thinks you're starving and it'll hold on to every calorie, every fat cell that it could find. And people wonder why they can't lose weight. One of the things I did with people in 2020 was tell them continue all your weight loss efforts. You're not seeing the results now because you're stressed out, you're anxious, you're worried, you're fearful about everything that's going on, but please don't give up. Do not give up. You will see that weight come off once things start to settle down. And I would explain to them about what cortisol does, how, when your body's in fear and anxious, how when you're stressed out, you hold on to every calorie. And I said, it's a self-defeating purpose.
Mhm.
If you start to eat more, you're going to gain a lot more weight. It's going to be a lot more difficult. So just hang in there. The scale's not moving, but trust me. And the ones that did saw over a period of time, months to almost a year, that yes, it did work.
Nice.
They could get out of that fight or flight,
Mhm.
that their body could function better. And it didn't function in survival mode. When you're
Right.
looking to survive, you can't lose weight.
Right.
You can't
Right.
think properly. I mean, there's so many things you can't do
Right.
because you're just looking to save your life.
And there's a lot of programs out there that offer that weight loss, those tricks and tips, and the stubborn belly fat that we always hear about. And every time I see a new program or a new summit on this and webinar on this, and I think exactly what you're talking about. If you're in fight or flight, it's almost like it really is an uphill battle.
Yeah,
It really
it's
is.
self-sabotage. We do sabotage. And, the more we start to understand this, that yes, we do sabotage our health and well-being because
Mhm.
every time we remain stressed out, every time we remain in survival mode, we start secreting all these hormones,
Yeah.
epinephrine, adrenaline, the same things that are used to start a heart when it stops are the same things that don't contribute to your health and well-being
Right.
when they're done, overactively, or you're secreting too much of it and you're disrupting your body, a body out of balance. I mean, where does disease come from? Dis-ease.
Right.
It's a disequilibrium in the body. Unless there's something genetic or nervous system or something that has gone wrong physically during a pregnancy, we're born healthy. We're not born with diabetes, with high blood pressure, with heart disease. We don't come into the world with that. Do we help create it? And I hope I don't offend people. But yes, we do help create it by our actions, by the way we are, by our inability to either recognize and manage stress or to just say, well, this is the way I am. You don't know how many patients I had say to me, well, my whole family's anxious. I said, well, then you're going to be anxious. If you don't want to change it, there's nothing that's going to change it.
And like you said early in the conversation, the environment that we grow up in is equally as important.
Yes.
If your whole family thrives on chaos and stress, well, yeah, that's what you're raised with, is chaos and stress and anxiety and fear. And you again, it's an uphill battle to overcome a lot of that. And I think it's pretty common for in the work that I do, I don't know if this is true for you, but in the work that I do, very few people come to me and say that they had an amazing childhood and everything was perfect and their home life was completely satisfying and it was sunshine and daisies all day, every day, infinity.
Yeah.
It's not, that's not how we get ill.
Yeah. Yeah. But still, Once we become old enough to recognize things, we do have a choice. And we could either continue that family pattern. I mean, how many people make a choice not to be abusers? How many
Yeah.
people make a choice not to be alcoholics who use drugs because they've seen the effects on their family? I mean,
Yeah.
nobody's had a perfect childhood. I mean,
Right.
I grew up with a mentally ill mother. Now she would be called manic depressive. But when she was good, she was good. When she was bad, I mean, she was even hospitalized a few times, had electric shock therapy. I was 12 years old when I was offered Xanax before a test
Wow.
because my mother loved Xanax. Back in the day, her family doctor gave it to her like it was candy. And
Wow.
if I was saying, I have a hard test today, oh, have a Xanax, or take a half, it'll calm you down. Well, that's not who
Wow.
I wanted to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not who I wanted to be.
Yep.
As a young child, we don't have a choice, but as we get older,
Right.
we do have choices. I think it's then that we need to seek out the tribe that we want to be with.
Mm-hmm.
If our parents are drug addicts, do we want to go down that path, be with all the drug addicts, or do we want to do something different? And people do. You look at some of the amazing stories of how people were raised and what they chose to do with that,
Mm-hmm.
how they took those challenges and really turned them into opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's true across the board. There are people who have come from the absolute worst conditions possible and have, like you said, made the decision to rise above their environment and rise above everything that they've been taught and everything going on around them and leave
Yeah.
and forge a new path. And it's not easy necessarily. I'm sure some people find it easy, but for the most part, it does take some grit and some determination and some strength and some resilience. But the rewards, I mean, the rewards are an entirely different life than what you were born into.
Yeah.
And it's everything.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we have a lot in common with our moms. They might not have been the most mentally stable, and I love my mom dearly, of course. She's my mom, but she really has been my example of how I don't want to treat my health or my dis-ease.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
when I was young, I joke that I was born addicted to nicotine and sugar, but it's really no joke. I was born to that. And I had secondhand smoke, 2 packs a day, secondhand smoke for the first 20 years. I lived off of sugar and antibiotics for recurrent strep throat. So I didn't have a great foundation. And the pattern was go to the doctor, get some pills, and repeat the cycle, wash, rinse, repeat. And by the time I was about 15, I was like, this is kind of nuts. Why do I keep getting strep throat? Why do I keep needing antibiotics? Why do I? And my incessant whys are what launched me into what ended up being my path. But for those who don't, maybe are kind of caught in that hamster wheel of wash, rinse, repeat, what is in your experience, what is your best advice to get off that hamster wheel and try something new and just start forging a different path?
Yeah, I think one of the things is to spend time with yourself. And by that, I mean just quiet time. I think meditation does a world of good for everybody. I know not everybody likes that word, or some people associate it with I have to sit 20 minutes, empty my mind, which you can't empty your mind anyway, because we're thinking human
Right.
beings. And that's
Right.
the way we're built.
That's just how the mind works, right?
But it doesn't mean we have to worry about everything. And I think when you sit quietly without disturbance, whether you could do it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20, whatever you could do, you start to listen to that inner voice and that inner guidance. And that inner voice is really your soul. The seat of your soul is your heart. So when you could start to listen to your heart, then you could start to get that inner guidance. And I think our heart is really what guides us. It guides us in the right direction. It's a matter of us listening to it. And when we're so preoccupied with everything on the outside, when we don't take the time to sit quietly, and it's hard. I mean, I was involved, I'm also a Toastmaster, and I was involved in a conference, an international contest, I should say. And it was online, and they interview the contestants afterwards. And, somebody got interviewed, and it was a person who had just retired. And oh my goodness, when I listened to him, he had to have every moment of his day filled up.
Oh,
And he was like, at 10 o'clock, I do this, at 11 o'clock. And then I found this place where people go there and you could read a book, and I could go to the light, and I could be here and I could be there. And then I do this, and then at 10 o'clock, and then at midnight, And he said, I never dreamed I'd be so busy when I retired. I mean, I don't have a moment to myself. This is really great. And I'm thinking, no, it isn't. You're just doing busy work.
yeah.
It's busy work. It's fine to be busy, but find some time for yourself, because
Mhm.
maybe your heart is trying to guide you towards something in retirement, something that you couldn't do before.
Mhm.
Maybe you had a passion that now is going to start to come out.
Mhm.
Maybe there's something that you're called to do, but you can't listen to that if you don't spend time with yourself. And I know sometimes spending time with ourselves is scary.
Mhm.
People don't like to do that. They like to be distracted. They like that constantly having something to do. It's a routine. It becomes
Mhm.
your purpose, but is it really your purpose?
And especially after so many decades of doing that, of not listening to yourself, if this gentleman retired at say 60, 65, whatever it is, that's a lot of years of ignoring self and a lot of years of practicing the art of busyness, right?
Yeah.
And I remember years ago when I was, you know, kind of first dipping my toe in the alternative waters, not the allopathic medicine route, but anything outside of that. And somebody said, you have to schedule white space. You have to put white space on your calendar. And I first of all, I didn't even know what that meant. And when I said, what does that mean? She said, you have to carve out time just for you.
Mhm.
And I recommend at least once a week, if not once a day. And I literally said, what do I do with that time? I was clueless. What does that mean to spend time with self? And I honestly didn't really want anything to do with it. White space became a chore and a daunting task until I really started to be willing to just allow that. And the floodgates opened, and it was a little tumultuous. I'm not going to lie. It was a little rocky, but it changed my life
Yeah.
to just carve out some time to get to know me.
Yeah.
And like you said, what do I have any gifts and do I have any talents? I don't think I do. What I don't have anything special to offer. Well, we all do.
We
We
all,
all have gifts. We all have talents and we all have something to offer.
yeah. I mean, I was kind of thrown into spending time with myself when I started my initiation and studies with Sri Dharma Mitra, because here was a person that spent a good hour every day in meditation. Not that he expected me to, but he would always say to me, you just keep yourself so busy. What are you running from?
Yes.
I would think to myself, what do you mean? What am I running from? I have a career, I have this, I have that, I'm productive. I'm not running from anything. And he would
Yes.
just sit there and laugh. He wouldn't say anything. He would just kind of sit there, smile. And I say, no, 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 Dharma, you don't understand. I barely have the time to come to see you once a week. And I used to get annoyed because when I would go see him, the first thing he would have me do is sit down,
Yes.
10 minutes. You had to be quiet, no talking. And I thought, I only have an hour and a half, and now you're wasting already 10 minutes right off the bat. And, one time I asked him, I said, oh, didn't you have time to do your meditation at home? What do you mean? He said, when I get up, and he told me his routine was one of the first things he does is his meditation. I said, then why are we sitting here now? He said, it's not for me, it's for you. He said, how are you going to listen? And how are we going to work through things if you don't know yourself?
Yes.
And like you said, it's scary.
Yes.
Things come up, and, you kind of, it was a scary process. I can't say it was always the easiest.
Right.
And he's still my teacher. He's still my teacher. And, it's been quite a journey, but I think it's been a journey that through my journey, I've been able to help other people. And if I could tell anybody anything about their health and well-being, I would tell them the main thing is to sit quietly with yourself, that meditation, call it quiet time, meditation, take a walk, being in the present moment, anything that's keeping you in the present moment is your greatest gift towards your health and well-being, because that is what puts you in peace and calm, and it helps keep your body in balance, and it does the world of good for you. And I've seen such changes with patients that would listen and do that, and they would come back months later and said, you're absolutely right, that I start off my morning now with gratitude and with sitting quietly, and it changes my whole perspective on my day.
Yes.
And you become less angry,
Yes.
you become more peaceful and calm. Other people start to notice these changes in you. It may take,
Absolutely.
but they do
Yes.
notice. So I would
And
tell anybody, the two things: sit quietly, some sort of form of meditation or quiet time, and be aware of your breathing.
yes.
Because the more you could synchronize your breathing, be aware of your breathing, and listen to what your heart is telling you.
And it's interesting that you use the expression "a world of good." I had a conversation with a friend a few days ago who was studying to be a social worker because she wanted to save the world, right? And into her studies, she said, I didn't even want to be a social worker anymore because I can't change the world, but we can all change the world by doing our own work."
Right. And change, what Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world.
Mhm.
And there's no other way around it. You can't change other people. Um, One thing that does happen when you become more peaceful and calm, and you start to connect to your heart. The heart is the largest vibrational energy field in the body. It extends anywhere from 3 to 6 feet outside of ourselves. So people in close proximity start to pick up on what we're feeling. And you've
Absolutely.
probably seen this, whether it be in a workplace, even like a peaceful demonstration. You could have a demonstration that's peaceful. All of a
Yes.
sudden, things get out of hand. They call
Yes.
it mob mentality. And that's because somebody's energy changed. And for
Yes.
whatever reason, they start to emit this energy that starts to be felt by others around them. If you don't realize it's somebody else's energy and you think it's your own, you start to join in with that. And before you know it, you either have a disruptive workplace where
Mhm.
everybody's angry and, mad at each other, whatever, or you have a demonstration that's gone wrong.
Mhm.
And um, the mob mentality again starts with us, that the more we're
Absolutely.
peaceful and calm, even in a workplace, if you're peaceful and calm and you approach people with respect,
Yes.
and you don't fly off the handle and get mad, you'll notice that those in close proximity to you are more peaceful and calm.
It's absolutely true. And anybody who's worked with animals in any way would most certainly agree that your energy dictates how it's going to go.
Oh, yeah.
Your energy is how an animal is going to respond to you or not. You know, they might completely ignore you. They might be aggressive with you, and they might just be really attracted to your energy, but you dictate that. Whatever's coming from you, they're matching.
Yeah. And I have a good example. A few weeks ago, I was in Egypt and I was with an energy medicine group. So it wasn't really a vacation, it was really an experience. And one of the things was a camel ride. And I wanted to ride a camel, but I also knew they were dangerous. And,
Mhm.
as a nurse, what kicks in with me is when you're maybe 10 feet off the ground, if you
Right.
fall,
Yeah.
there's a potential to really get hurt.
Mhm.
So I approached the camel from a state of concern. And I can't say fear, but yeah, a little anxiety of how am I going to hold on, this and that. So I get on the camel. The camel's laying down when you get on the camel.
Right.
And, I was told what to do, grip the saddle, which I was holding on to for dear life. And, you know, with your thighs,
Yes.
press the camel
Hang
and
on.
put some pressure. Well, did that. My camel's not moving. The camel's not going anyplace. The camel's turning around and looking at me, but not doing anything. So I said to the guide, I said, what's wrong? He said, you have to calm down. He
Yeah.
said, this animal's not going to go anyplace. He's picking up on your anxiety. I said, what do you mean? He said, loosen your grip on the saddle. He said, and loosen your grip with your thighs. So, but what if I fall off? He said, that's what I'm here for. He said, I'm not going to let you fall off. He said, but in order to enjoy the camel ride, the camel has to enjoy you. And right now, the
Wow.
camel is not enjoying you at all.
Wow.
I did what he said. I took some deep breaths and I loosened my grip on everything. And I thought, okay, here goes. What the heck? And the camel stood right up and started walking. And it was amazing as I flowed with the camel. And
Yes.
as you kind of rock back and forth with the camel went into this nice cadence. And we had a beautiful ride for an hour. And I had absolutely no problems with that camel. But when the camel first picked up on my anxiety and my fear of falling off, the camel didn't want that to happen either. And the camel
Yes.
didn't want to be around me. So he just dug his legs in and wasn't going to move. And
And people can be the same way.
yeah, and the guides are very perceptive and they know and they understand fear and they know how to
Right.
get you out of it. Either you have to calm down and trust the animal or get off. And that's
Right.
basically what the guide said.
Right.
You know,
It just
you
might
have
not be
to
for
trust-
you. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
camel's name was Michael Jordan. So I said, you got to trust Michael Jordan or you got to get off. He said,
Okay.
there's no way around this because the
Yeah.
guy certainly wasn't going to spend an hour trying to talk me or the camel into doing something.
Right. Right. And that's a beautiful example of how things can go in the workplace, or how things can go in a clinic setting, or
Yeah.
how things can go in a government setting. I mean, it's really no different. People forget that we're animals.
Yeah. And,
Just because we can talk and think and rationalize and judge and calculate doesn't mean we're not animals.
right. Right. And, one of the differences between us and animals is if you look at animals, they live from their heart. They're
Yeah.
not aggressive. I
Yeah.
mean, whether it be a crocodile, anything, it's only when they feel survival, their survival is threatened.
Right.
A dog doesn't think and say, I see so and so walking down the street, I'm going to go attack them.
Right.
That's not how they think. Most animals are content to be either left alone or content to be around human beings and other animals. And they're only aggressive when they feel threatened. So to me, animals live from their heart because they're really looking to live peacefully. A tiger doesn't go out in the jungle and say, who can I kill?
Right.
If it's hungry, it's going to go after prey.
Yes.
If something gets in its way. But, for the most part, I don't think there's ever been really, really so aggressive animals that they sit there and think in the morning, how many people am I going to kill today?
Yeah,
Or how many
it's true.
other animals?
It's true. It's true. So we've got spending time with self, staying quiet, practicing the art of being quiet, practicing breathing.
Breathing.
And I mean, I have personally found the 4-7-8 breathing really beautiful.
Mhm.
What methods do you feel have been the most beneficial for you or anybody you've worked with?
Yeah, again, if you could do the 4-7 or the 4-8, whatever you want to call it. But I just tell people, just be aware of a slow, deep breath. Try to hold it for a second if you can. If you can't, just let it out gently. And I also tell people to put their hand on their heart. When they wake up in the morning, put your hand on your heart. Be aware that your heart is beating, because we're not aware of it. It just happens.
Right.
And it's only if something goes wrong or we perceive something goes wrong that we pay attention to our heart. And, my time at a medical mission years ago taught me differently that, we look at the heart from the wrong perspective. We see it always as disease. I mean, one of the favorite things to call a heart is heart disease.
Mm.
We're just, it's like there has to be something that's going to go wrong with your heart. Well, there doesn't have to be. But, when we look at things like, oh, that person has heart disease, high blood pressure, blocked arteries, we're labeling them.
Mhm.
We're labeling them and their heart is diseased. Whereas if we could look at our heart as our superpower, that it helps build our immunity, it helps sustain life. It's our biggest ally against stress because it connects directly to the vagus nerve.
Mhm.
And if we could know our heartbeat, that each heartbeat is unique to each
Yes.
individual, to kind of flow with that heartbeat. And the best we can connect our breathing to our heart. And sometimes that's not always the easiest, but
Mhm.
to breathe in and out with a rhythm and to be
Mhm.
aware of that rhythm. Because each time we take a deep breath and we exhale with intentional breathing, as I call it, the heart secretes a hormone. It secretes a substance which smooths out the heart, which also can help with the conduction system of the heart. So,
So if a person practices this for a few weeks, a few months, even a year, what might they see with the vagal nerve and vagal tone and digestion and mood?
well, the vagus nerve also, it starts in the stomach, and the stomach, heart, and throat are always connected with the chakras. They're like almost the three, what I call the three main chakras for
Mhm.
your health and well-being. With digestion, you're going to notice that you digest food better. That once you're in that state of calm, what the vagus nerve does is it puts you in a state of peace or calm. It's inner tranquility. So the stress hormones are turned off. So the body is at peace, the body is in equilibrium, and the body's allowed to do what it's meant to do. So for the stomach, you're digesting food at whatever rate then the stomach feels is necessary. You're processing those nutrients. Those nutrients are going into the bloodstream. Um, you're also having a slower, steadier heart rate. So a slow, steady heart rate is always the best. You're noticing your blood pressure goes down a little bit. It's not to say if you don't have high blood pressure that you still won't need medication, because sometimes it's the receptors like on the kidneys and whatnot that need help. And you can't always change that with peace and calm. A lot of
Mhm.
times you need pharmacological, but that's okay. You still keep doing your own more natural things, and they work together.
Mhm.
So if you could, what was I saying? So if you could have a slower, steadier heart rate, if you could be aware of your breathing, what you're really doing is putting your body in homeostasis or putting your body in balance. the less hard the heart has to work, the less chance you have when you're older of your heart wearing out. And really, if you look at heart failure, it really is, a failing heart. And maybe at some point, if you live long enough, it may or may not happen. But certainly, if you keep putting pressure on the heart, the heart's beating faster, it has to work faster. All those things, it's like a car.
Mhm.
If you're constantly just putting gas in it and treating the oil and the outside, if you don't look at the engine and really do the inner maintenance, eventually your car is going to fall apart. And I really believe that with our health and well-being, that we really have to do that inner work. And that
Yes.
inner work is, to live from our heart with compassion, gratitude, being resilient, going with the flow, and practicing forgiveness. And sometimes that takes a lot. But
Yes.
if we could do those four things, we're in a state of peace and calm. If we could couple that with things like meditation every morning and every evening, just finding a few minutes to sit quietly with yourself, to even just thank for being alive.
Mhm.
And if we could pair that with breathing, that throughout the day to be aware of how we're breathing. The deeper the breath we take, the more oxygen goes to all our cells.
Mhm.
And then if we could also, there's also yoga, which I think is one of the best things that we could do as a practice, not only spiritual, but physical, because the whole process of yoga makes us strong
Mhm.
mentally, physically, and spiritually. So there's three things that help our inner landscape. And if we change that inner landscape, we could really change our health and well-being.
Yes. Beautiful. So, if you wouldn't mind briefly telling us a little bit about your book. What
Oh,
do
okay.
you offer in your book?
Uh,
And
my book is called Heal Your Heart from Within. And in the book, I share all the information, all the knowledge, and all the tools. And most of them have to do with things like, you know, being compassionate. I have meditations about compassion, mantras about compassion, the same thing with gratitude, about, perhaps keeping a gratitude journal, about being resilient, going with the flow and why it's important, and about the process, how you could practice the process of forgiveness and why it's important. And the reason, especially forgiveness, is important is because if you can't forgive, you're holding anger.
yes,
And once you hold that anger in, again, eventually it's going to disrupt your health. It's going
yes,
to, because it has no place else to go. There's no other outlet for it. And normally the other person doesn't even think that they hurt us, or they don't care that they did.
right.
And that's why it's important you don't forget, but you forgive to get on with your own life. So those are really the cornerstones of inner peace and tranquility. Excuse me. And then of course there's the meditation, there's breathing, there's things like intentional breathing, which is breathing in, you could hold it for the count of 7 and then breathe out. There's also alternate nostril breathing, where you could breathe in through one nostril, hold it, breathe out through the other nostril. I go
Mm.
into that in the book, and a couple other breathing techniques, which are a little bit more difficult to explain on a podcast.
That's all right.
Things like yoga nidra, how stress affects the body, that
Mhm.
whole cascade of what happens when we're under stress, how it affects the organs in the body, the thyroid, the cortisol secretion, the fight or flight for survival. The book goes into intuition. I tell a personal story, a professional personal story of a patient that I visited the night before cardiac surgery to get him to sign the paperwork for the next day. And he told me he was going to die. He was 44 years old. And he said, I know I'm going to die in surgery. I believed him.
Wow.
I totally believed him, called the surgeon, told the surgeon to cancel surgery. The surgeon berated me
Yeah.
and, said he made a mistake hiring me. really made me question not only my sanity, but my professionalism, everything. I
Yeah.
went back into the patient. I said, I believe you, but these are the reasons that I need you to sign this. And I was perfectly honest with the patient. I said, in the end, it's up to you.
Yeah.
The patient said, I will do what you ask. I don't want you to lose your job. I don't want you to be ridiculed professionally. He said, but I'll say goodbye to you now because I will not make it out of surgery. The
Wow.
next day, 45 minutes into surgery, he died.
Wow.
Absolutely no reason. The surgeon was a changed man after that. And, from then on in, he would listen to patients' intuition. Um, I learned a valuable lesson because I was really afraid to stand up against the surgeon because I
Yeah.
knew I would lose my job and I didn't want to lose my job.
Yeah.
And I went along with peer pressure. I was afraid to say to any colleagues, look at this is what's going on. How do I handle it?
Hmm.
And, as a result, somebody died. And
Yeah.
from then on in, I always learned to listen to what
Wow.
patients were telling me.
Wow.
They knew best. And if somebody told me I think something's wrong with me, I never dismissed it after that. So that's the chapter on intuition. There's a chapter on intention, how intention differs from positive thinking. Positive thinking is an attitude to think positive is beneficial, but we also need the intention. We need to believe it.
Right. It can't just be lip service. We
It
have to
just
feel
can't
it.
be that I'm going to say to myself that, I'm going to do this or that. We really have to believe that we're
Hmm.
capable
Hmm.
of doing this or that. And I think, what else do I go into? When stress is beneficial, what are the good things about stress? Stress motivates you, it's inspirational, it's creative. And I do a chapter on all the chakras, on what they are. They're these they're not, I can't say they're not validated by science, but they're not really. We just know that we have this energy within us that corresponds with certain organs in the body or certain hormones. And, like the root chakra is associated with the sacrum
Right.
and the intestines and our back. It's our
Right.
foundation for being able to stand. We have the second chakra, which is our area of creativity. And it's right in the area of the genital
Hmm.
organs.
Hmm.
And that's where our creativity comes from because birth is also creativity.
Hmm.
So when that chakra is open, we have more creativity. When it's blocked, we may have fertility problems, any type of creative problems. The third is right by our stomach. The third chakra is our power center. So, and that's where the vagus nerve starts. So that's what gets us into that inner peace and that tranquility. And it gets us into ourself. So our third chakra is really about our own personal power. Our fourth chakra, our heart, is about starting to act with that power, about listening to our heart, listening to our intuition. It's also about the thymus gland. The fifth chakra is the throat chakra, has to do with the thyroid gland, has to do with communication, has to do with are we willing and can we stand up and speak our truth? And then we have the sixth chakra, which is the third eye, which is really just opening to more of what we can't see. So that's how I look at the sixth chakra, is developing your intuition, also seeing the bigger picture, that there just may be things that you're not seeing with your eyes that are important. And then the seventh chakra, they call it enlightenment. I just kind of call it as more of that you're aware that you're a spiritual, emotional, and physical human being, and that mind, body, spirit has to work together. So that's really the book in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I can say, just from the little bit of experience that I've had, when those chakras are blocked, there are definite blocks in your life.
Yeah.
I have a device that can analyze the aura and the
Oh,
chakras. And, I know a lot of people think it's pseudoscience, and that's okay. I'm not here to convince anybody. I'm not in the business of convincing. I'm just in the business of sharing information. And these chakras and the energy field around the body can be photographed. They can be analyzed. Our heart isn't the only electrical system. The brain isn't the only electricity going on. We have electricity going on all around us. While we are alive, the electricity in our body can be measured in a lot of different areas. Those 7 chakras are the main.
For energy. I mean, you look
Right,
in the cells, potassium,
right,
sodium, it's all this exchange of electrolytes. And when those
right,
electrolytes get out of balance, then you could have illness, disease, you could have acute things happen, you could have all kinds of things. So we really have to be aware, like you said, of the
right.
body's energy. Again, it's not for everybody. There are people that, I have patients, sometimes I don't talk about the chakras. What I talk about is either the organs or the hormones that they
Yeah,
represent.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Some people are just a lot more mainstream, and we have to know their language, right?
yeah,
But it's to me, it's the utmost importance to really start to help people understand that there is no cutoff point somewhere in the body at a certain particular region where spiritual health begins and ends, where mental health begins and ends, and where physical health begins and ends. It really is, you're either healthy or you're not.
yeah,
And when you can start to embrace holistic health, how do you feel spiritually unwell? How do you feel mentally unwell? How do you feel physically unwell? Because sometimes a spiritual, you know, disalignment, a spiritual struggle can really trickle down into the body and manifest into an illness,
it
and
does.
vice versa. An illness can really separate you from your spiritual self, or your creator or God or whatever. And that was a personal one for me. When I had a really big trauma when I was a kid, I got really angry with God, and things didn't go well for me.
Yeah. And, to me, again, the spirituality is it's a universal, it's a higher knowing, it's a higher power than us. And that's really, I believe that the seat of the soul is in the heart. And, that's why I believe it's important that, to connect with our heart and, the things that I spoke about how to connect with the heart. And again, you don't have to believe anything. You could just call it, the universe within, the all knowing. It's a power higher than us. And if you even look at things like Alcoholics Anonymous, they say turn it over to a higher power.
Mhm.
There's no denomination. But if you look at mind, body, spirit, it's always mind, body, spirit. You never see
Right.
it written another way. And that's because the mind affects the body affects the mind, the
Yes.
body affects the spirit affects the body. And
Mhm.
all three of them have to be in unison. If one of
Right.
them is out of balance, eventually the other two will. So if you're
Yes.
even looking at a spiritual struggle, it affects the energy around you. It
Yes.
affects a lot of things. It may not go right into the body. It may be years because those cells hold on to memories, the cells hold on to trauma. And over the years, the cells don't function as well as they should. And when you have even a car that's not functioning as well as it should, eventually it's going to break down. It may be 10 years. Same thing with the body. It may take you 30 years to get an illness. But if the mind, body, spirit aren't working together, if the mind's affected, if the spirit, some of those are the outside more of our oracle energy.
Yeah.
And eventually that does permeate the body. It may take a long time. And in a way, it's a good thing because could you imagine if everything affected the physical body right away?
Yeah, I can imagine, and that would be rough.
Yeah. So
I
the
mean,
body
a lot of us would probably
is a
combust.
protective mechanism. It does as much as it can for
Yeah.
as long as it can.
Yeah.
And
Our bodies are pretty amazing, aren't they?
it really is. And I mean, our spirit, our mind is amazing. And once we get those three things, really working and really become who we're meant to be, our authentic selves, and, stand up for ourselves and our beliefs and listen to other people. Doesn't mean you have to go along with everything that's being said. But, be open. Maybe there is some merit in what so-and-so is saying. Maybe there is some merit in doing something this way. Well, I'll decide that. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe it is for me. But just that willingness
Right.
of being open and opening our mind and, opening our spirit, that there's so many things out there. And it doesn't say we have to believe them all, or it doesn't say we have to be a particular religion or have any religion or anything. To me, it's just the possibility that, yes, there's something greater than us. And I think we all know that. It just doesn't stop with us.
Yeah.
There's things much greater. There's much greater happening in the world than just us.
Exactly. I agree. And I couldn't agree more. We really don't have any idea what we're capable of. If we had any idea how powerful we were, and if we had any idea that the possibilities truly are limitless, we would see a whole different world. We would have a whole different life, just experiencing unlimited possibilities within ourselves, and
Yeah.
then extending that to others. It's really all I want to do
Yeah.
with the work that I do, is try to get people to just nudge a little bit closer toward opening that door of what's possible,
Yeah.
and looking at all of the things that are possible and seeing what really makes sense to us as individuals.
Yeah. And, I think that with anything, I think that, with everything, that your mindset is really the most important, because
Yes.
I've known people that should have lived with an illness but died, and
Yes.
people that shouldn't have lived and lived. And I
Yes.
mean, the monk was a perfect example. It's that mental, um, what do you want to call it? That how you are mentally and how you
Yes.
perceive yourself, how you perceive the illness. He saw something as an obstacle and said, "Yeah, okay, my heart is damaged, but that doesn't mean that I'm damaged. It just means
Right.
that I've got some work to do."
Right.
And he did that work. Somebody else could have sat there and said, well, what's the use? And I mean, you
Right.
look at people, they do remarkable things. I mean, people walk when they're not supposed to be walking.
Yeah.
Uh,
Joe Dispenza
People,
is a perfect example of that.
so many things,
Yeah. Yeah.
so there's just so much out there. And a lot of it we really don't know. So, I hate to see any of us minimize our potential for doing anything,
Right.
because if your child is stuck under a car, you have the strength to lift that car.
Yes.
So if you could do that, just think of what you could do if you
Yes.
really put your mind to something. I mean, that's instinctual, but if you really put your mind to something, what we're all really capable of. And, I think it's just, eh, the world would be so different if we all saw ourselves and saw each other in ourselves, that each
Yes.
of us is doing the best we can. And if we look at each other from that higher power, that another person has that same higher power in them that I do, therefore we have something in common, therefore we should work together.
Right. Right. I cannot think of a better way to close this than to try to remember that we really are not all that different. We are all trying to have the best life we know how to have. And we really are here to support one another. So let's just do that.
Yeah.
Let's
And
lay down our swords already and just work together, and reach the same goal that ultimately the majority of the population has. We all want to live happy, productive lives, and we want to do that freely.
yeah, we're all just trying and doing the best we can. And there's a Sanskrit greeting that means hello and goodbye, and it's namaste. And it means
Mhm.
I honor the light in you, which is the same light in me.
Yes.
So we're all the same on the inside. It's only the outside that's different. And we may go about things differently, but I think in the end, everybody has, the same intentions. And really, it's about just respecting other people, being open to other people's opinions, not shutting them out. It's just really, to me, it's just really about respecting other people,
Mhm.
respecting not only human beings, but every other being,
Yes.
because everything works together. I mean,
Yes.
if you didn't have a bee, you wouldn't have certain things. If you didn't have a cow, we all contribute to the universe, and we all contribute. We all have our own unique gifts, and we just sometimes need to sit down, be with ourselves, and listen to that inner voice that tells you what your purpose is.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much for having coffee with me today. Of
Uh,
course, I'm going to add all of your links so people know how to find you, know how to find your book, and know how to find me. If anybody has their gift and talent that they would like to share with us and you would like to have coffee, please reach out to me. I would love to have coffee with you and hear what your gifts and talents are. And welcome to our community of just helping everybody just live better, do better, be better people, and raise this world up a little bit, just a little bit better.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Teresa.
Oh, thank you so much. It really was a pleasure. And I hope that I know that the people that need to hear this will definitely hear it. That's the way it works.
And honestly, I hope they pause it and re-listen a few times, because you've dropped some really beautiful gifts in here if people have the right ear to hear what you've offered. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Abundant blessings, everyone. Bye for now.